What's up, everybody? So I'm going to sit here and flap my jaws about guilt for a minute. Guilt. And like why it is such a big part of our lives. And as being humans, like we're the only creature that we know of that can be consciously aware of our own death and the fact that we're going to die. And base our lives accordingly and live our lives according to what we think is right. And I think that guilt, we associate guilt with so many things we do. How appropriate I would bring a bowl of cannabis to smoke while I'm doing this video. Because cannabis is one of those things that that sometimes I feel guilt for and sometimes I don't. Sometimes in my life. Like perhaps I've been smoking too much or haven't been doing enough. Or maybe if I didn't smoke so much pot I would do this. But generally I don't feel guilty for smoking pot. But when I smoked cigarettes, even though I didn't smoke that many, I still felt guilty because I knew that I wasn't gaining anything from it and I could be possibly losing something from it. So that's a different kind of guilt than the guilt that I'm going to talk about here. When you feel guilty because you know you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, that is motivational guilt that helps us to become better people. Now, whether or not you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing based on the fact that you know naturally that you shouldn't be doing it, or because someone's told you you shouldn't be doing it, those are different things. And I think that a lot of folks who have guilt built up in their lives, that feel guilty about a lot of things. Oh, I feel bad I did this, feel bad about this. Many of them were raised in religious households. And I know this because after talking with enough people about how they feel about humanity in general, when I found that a large percentage of the religious folks think that, or at least Christians think that we were born in sin. And that plays a huge part in how we perceive our environment. And I've tried to get around that subject of the discussion by convincing people that we are inherently good-natured people, and that we aren't born sinners. But many folks just can't get past that. That's a hang-up. That's a dogma. That's belief that if you don't believe that you were born a sinner, then you can't be a Christian. And that kind of goes without saying. I don't know any Christians who don't believe that they were born sinners, or I've never met a single Christian who doesn't believe that he needs to be saved by Jesus. So, in that sense, they're already programmed with an idea that what they're doing is wrong and that they were born wrong and that they were guilty, that children are wrong and that people are wrong by nature. And I think that that's a big hang-up that we need to get past, because I don't see that in my way of thinking. I know that people can become bad and that may need to be forgiven or forgive themselves for things that they've done. But if you don't start off with a clean slate, you can't end with one. In other words, with a situation like this, where you're born already a sinner, then you have situations where, what about somebody who's born who dies right away? Well, they weren't old enough to know better. Okay, well, what about when children die and they're not saved yet? Well, if they're under a certain age, they have to make rules and exceptions in order to make this fit. So anytime you have to change a format of something in order to make it fit a particular thought, it's no longer valid. Because if it's the ultimate pure truth, then it should resonate and work for all. Like an ultimate truth would be that things are what they are, and that there will be ups and downs. That's something that goes through transfers every religion and every age and race and sex and everything. That good things happen and bad things happen. But when you start saying that bad things are going to happen unless you do this, let's say in your next life, and you start speculating, then this guilt sets in. The guilt that I've done something wrong, that I haven't lived up to my full potential as a human. And how do you ever really get past that kind of a guilt? That you're a flawed human. Now, two angles to this I want to consider. The first one is the person who thinks that they're born a sinner and then decides later in life they're going to ask for forgiveness, and then they're all free and clear. And they may have lived a horrific life and done many guilty bad things, many things that they feel really guilty about. But as soon as they've asked for forgiveness and they're saved, they can finally relax. They don't have to mend any of these issues from the past because they're saved. Their life is clear. Pope said so. It's on. Then we have folks who do good all their life and do the best they can, help their neighbors and family and friends. And then they are confronted by someone who says, well, it's not good enough. You're going to hell because you don't believe in this. This is something that just has to get past, and we can't seem to get past. And so when I talk about guilt, in the sense of being a guilty person, there's the guilt for things you've done, and then there's the guilt for things you haven't done. And in between there's guilt for things that you have done that aren't really wrong, but you feel guilty for because you've been told to feel guilty about them. Such as, you might download a song illegally and not feel guilty about it. Oh, whatever, it's just a song. Is that right or wrong? I mean, it is someone else's intellectual property, but there becomes all these little justifications. Oh, well, I bought this album back then, or, I went to the concert, I paid them money, and, or, you want to get something nice for yourself, and you say, well, I've earned it, I've done this and that. We tell ourselves stories in order to justify everything we do, and this is one of the most fascinating things about people, to me, is how far we're willing to go to defend our point of view. It's amazing. I've seen it so clearly in other people that I make it a really strong point to try not to do it as much as possible. But then I find myself even doing it. But usually I'm only defending a point of view when I truly believe it's valid now, you see, rather than trying to... I have to think about it. If someone confronts me on something and asks me a question, about like, well, how can you believe this if this? And I don't usually get a lot of questions about my beliefs because I don't really put any out there. Because I don't, I guess my belief system is an idea that beliefs are created as we go along. And that the ultimate goal doesn't require a system. It just requires desire and effort. But ultimately, I've come to the conclusion in my life that there is no guilt, nor is there good or bad, because we associate good or bad with what we think, what we perceive, what we've created to be good or bad. And I know a lot of people would argue that and say, no, there's absolute evil and there are bad forces, and that's fine. I'm not denying that there could be bad forces. I'm just saying that for the most part, nothing dominates us except for our own. If we don't have the capacity to do things properly, like if we don't build an education system to where we can utilize that in order to properly act, then we fall victim to other folks' beliefs, things other people have created. And we tend to believe of other folks because they've paved the way, because, hey, humanity's already been through this, they've led to where we are now. And I don't think that's very healthy. I think it's very unhealthy to live on someone else's coattails. But that being said, we still have to read and research the things other people have written and done. So, on that note, how could someone cast aside something that someone wrote just because they don't believe it to be valid? And that's the problem. Many of these ancient writings, ancient texts were done very complicated, very difficult to do. They didn't just have paper and a pen available. They put an effort into this and hid them away. And they were trying to preserve basic allegories for people, what really works. And in the end, they all kind of wrap back to the same thing, that guilt is something we create in order to protect ourselves. But there's also natural guilt, I guess. I mean, I can't say that humans create guilt 100%, because I know that there probably is an inherent guilt. That would be a feeling, a vibe, if you're doing something wrong. That's intuition in its own sense. but that's different. And I don't feel guilty about anything. I may have, you know, if I ever have any regrets about something, I just work to change it to make sure I don't do it anymore. But I don't feel guilty as if I've done anything, and I really feel strongly, I feel really bad for people who feel guilty for what they've done, or I should say, people who feel guilty for what they haven't done. You know, folks who are in an upbringing right now where they are in a family that goes to church where a person stands on a podium and tells them that they're wrong, that they've been living wrong, and that they need to be forgiven. And it's just, it's ludicrous. It's totally ludicrous. And I keep coming back to this because to religion in the end, you know, I anticipate making a video about guilt, and it ends up coming back to religion because Christianity has the ultimate guilt, that we're all born guilty. And I can't see how that's ever been productive or assisted in humanity. And I think a lot of Christians might say, well, it's not supposed to assist humanity, it's supposed to assist the individual to find Christ. That's fine too, but if it's not assisting everyone equally, it doesn't make sense to me. So I guess a lot of things don't make sense to a lot of us, and that's what makes life so interesting. So I'm trying not to cast anything out, but at the same time, I'm allowing my instinct to lead me to which things belong and which things don't, and guilt doesn't belong. You can see how it's affected our history by the way people have interpreted, say, the Bible over history. People will take certain chapters that will resonate with a entire group of people for, say, a century or more. There was a period where the Bible, everyone was thinking the end times are coming, and this is when guilt was really rampant. It said, well, we have to protect ourselves against, you know, life in hell, so we're gonna do the best we can now to rid ourselves of all the bad people around us. All kinds of things happen. They go out and they'd hunt down other groups and people who didn't believe. They figured, well, I can only believe so strongly, so if I can go kill someone who doesn't believe what I believe, then that'll prove my faith even that much more. And so they'll go through periods where an entire, you know, book of the Bible will be strongly utilized as justification for what we do, whether it be slavery or abuse. And then a new century will come, and things will be perhaps a little more peaceful, and maybe resonate back to the happy Jesus, or the forgiving Jesus, the kind Jesus, the teacher. You know, and if you look back through history, you'll find different phases. You get the angry Jesus, the grateful Jesus, the angry great Jesus, the happy Jesus. It goes back and forth depending on how people are, and so we reflect everything in the way our society perceives it. And that goes for everything. That goes for books, stories, you know, archetypes. And so we each take what we want out of it. And if a person wants to feel guilty over something that they have no reason to feel guilty for, I would urge them to rethink that and ask yourself why. And because I think it can usually be traced back to psychological guilt about other things, or about what we're told by our parents. So, hope you all have a great day, and toodaloo. Peace.